All right, so hello and welcome back, everyone. I've had a couple students reach out asking about the equipment selection and production calculations for the underground course project. Um, this is for Bluefield State University's MIET 392 underground mining class. Um, so I've had a couple students reach out about that. And good news, that's what we're covering today. So this will be two separate video lectures. The first of which we're going to be talking a little bit about equipment selection. So let's jump right into that. And so to give you an idea of the bigger picture of why we're doing this is something that you're going to have to do for your senior design project. And that's whether or not you're doing, a large surface mine, where you're going to have to size the drag line, that sort of thing, or you're doing an underground coal mine where you're going to have to, make equipment selections for, the reserve that you're going to be mining. So this is basically a bit of practice for that, and it's also, practice doing technical writing, be that for something you present to mine management, or maybe it's a client for a consultant, or just whomever, right? For this project, we need to consider a few things. One, we know our commodity is coal. However, there is a significant amount of rock in this coal that we're going to be mining, and the mining height is pretty significant, right? It's this sort of 111 inches is basically 9.25 feet, right? 9.25 feet. So it's pretty thick. And we also know the area of our reserve here that we're going to be mining, and we know that it's maybe 5,000 feet long, right? And even a bit narrower than that. So we know that we're basically already limited to room and pillar equipment. So let's get into talking about that for a bit, and then we'll move on. But kind of to start out, in some mines, you're going to need thin seam equipment. Not this one, but in some you will. For example, on the left here is what is probably a Joy 14 CM10. So the thin seam miner. And you may, see continuous haulage, which has been traditionally employed in, not only thin seams, but, uh, a lot of the times, a lot of the cases, thin seams. But we're mining just over 9 feet, right? And so you're going to need something that's a bit bigger than that. Um, here are two examples. There are more manufacturers out there. I'm not really concerned which one you pick. Um, but for example, in the Komatsu or Joy sort of lineup, you can get, medium to relatively thick seam 14 cm units. But in this case, you're most likely going to be using a 12 cm series miner. You might be using, say, a 1212, for example, a 12 CM12, or if you have it, perhaps the 12 CM27, which is a bit beefier for more difficult cutting, right? Or you could be looking at this, what's now known as the GCM 340 from Gainwell Engineering, for example. Like I said, there are other manufacturers, but this is basically a modern version of what was uh, the IMCO uh, miners, which then became Bucyrus, I believe, and then eventually Caterpillar ownership. I believe that's the legacy of this particular continuous miner. But this is the sort of sized equipment that we would be looking at for this reserve based on our geologic column, right? And due to this height and the depth of cover that we're going to be mining, we're going to need a bolt machine that's capable of drilling the ribs. Most likely, you will end up rib bolting the entirety of everything that's going to be mined in this area. Even if it is less than 700 feet of cover, it's still going to be, significantly high, the ribs. The most common roof bolting machine you're likely to see in a coal mine is a Fletcher machine. There are other machines out there. There are other models you can choose from. But most likely, you're going to want the larger model here because nine feet's pretty far off the ground. You're not going to be able to reach the top, right? At least not without being, like a basketball player or something. So you're going to need these, man lift baskets here to better access the roof for the roof bolter operators here. So with that, so what this is likely going to look like, you can see how the drillers are in their elevated positions up here near the roof line. This is a bit taller than 9. This is 10 feet or so here. Yeah. So, but this is likely what this is going to look like. It's going to be a walk-through machine, which does a very good job of protecting the operators from the ribs. More so than an outside control machine where you're moving and working over here. Except with our relatively thick sandstone roof in the project, our roof's not going to look like this. If it does, it would be an anomaly that you've encountered or something like that. And so what about haulage? So we've talked about continuous miners, we've talked about roof bolt machines. Haulage, you're most likely to see shuttle cars. In this case, you see 21SC, where you have the operator at the back sitting upright. This is for thicker seams, which is what you'll be encountering if you were to mine the project property. There are also shuttle cars, 21SCs, right, where the operator lies flat in the middle between the wheels. Those are for thinner seam conditions. Or you might even see, battery coal haulers out there. These could be, used for the purposes of the project if you so chose. Battery coal haulers, there's a couple, of advantages that you get. One, you can have just a little bit more flexibility than you get with shuttle cars, right? Because they're battery operated. They're not limited by cable, right? So you can do things that might be a little bit out of the ordinary. Number two, you can get these to operate in a little bit slightly thinner conditions than what you can for a shuttle car. It's in the order of inches though, so it's not, a tremendous advantage, but it is available. And then finally, you are likely to see these in the room and pillar mines out in the Midwest. They're a lot more popular out there for a number of reasons. One, you can mine, usually relatively small centers in the mines that are shallow covered. And you can open up a lot of entries, right? So they'll mine 10. I've seen 14, maybe even 15 entries. And then you'll have this fleet of coal haulers, right? That when they operate in this sort of cyclical kind of fashion, right? So they're after they leave the dump, they're coming back up to the miner, loading up, and then they're running this way. And this is mainly due to the way they're loaded and the way they articulate. Okay, so you end up needing like one or two more to get efficient production out of coal haulers in that cycle, because it's not sort of straight line. But you really can increase the footage that you're mining. Those mines out in the Midwest, they mine tremendous footage with this type of equipment. So it's out there. You might see it, and you could use it in the project if you wanted to. Or, like I said, you might see continuous haulage, or what I sometimes refer to as the Kentucky longwall. These systems, they've been popular in the past. In southern West Virginia, they've gone sort of out of favor. They're more difficult to run. You need people that are experienced in running them. They're less flexible, right? So they're difficult to turn. When I say turn, I mean the section, right? So you want to have as long a panels as you possibly can. Okay, so that's what you would want for a haulage system. Sometimes you'll see them used in conjunction with shuttle cars. I've seen mines where they advance with shuttle cars and then retreat with the haulage system. That's a little bit different. They're also pretty popular in central Pennsylvania. There are several bridge systems in operation by Rosebud. So there's a bunch up there in that region of central Pennsylvania as well. You could also see here what is the Joy Flexible Conveyor Train, FCT. I don't know if there are still any in operation. There used to be two of them in the Midwest. It was the only place that they were used that I know of. So I don't know if they still are or not, but it is possible you could see one of these out there. It was nicknamed the Snake, because it bends the way it does. So for the project, this is what you're going to need. So not necessarily every single piece of equipment, but basically pick a continuous miner, a haulage system, and a roof bolter. It doesn't matter which equipment supplier you choose. You can choose whatever you want. But I want you to justify your decisions based on, the expected conditions from, based on what we know about the property. And so explain these choices and justifications and the equipment selection. And then once again, like I said, the point of this is to start, practicing, writing justifications, right? Just justifications in general. In this case for equipment, but to have it in a professional format that you might submit to, like I said, mine management, a client, or whomever. Okay, so I do know that there is, of course, other equipment as well, even just in coal that doesn't even include other commodities. For example, scoops, are very common. They used to be used for haulage, in some cases, as we were mechanizing, and we were still shooting coal potentially, so we're still shooting the coal down, but instead of hand loading it or something like that, we were loading it out with scoops, and that hasn't been all that long ago, really. However, that using scoops for haulage would be extremely limited in today's mining, and they're typically used for cleanup of cuts. You can clean up, with a scoop. You can also, they have rock dust attachments for them. They're also used for bringing supplies up on the section and that sort of thing. More like, a utility vehicle. There's also a feeder breaker, which I didn't really mention, but if you were doing this project as your senior design, you would have to consider this piece of equipment. And, you need to keep in mind that there's a bunch of rock in here. So you're going to be going through bits faster than you typically would if this was, say, all coal, for example. And finally, this doesn't even include longwall equipment, right? Which, we did discuss the design of the shields, the powered supports, and what in this diagram. But you would also have to consider the sizing of the shear, the pan line or the AFC, that armored face conveyor. And you're also going to have, a stage loader, something else you don't have, in a room and pillar section, where you're getting the coal up, basically up and onto the belt. So that's specific, for long walls that we're not including in the project, but you need to know is out there. And finally, someone mentioned cribs, and I found this photo, right? So back in one of the discussion questions, we were talking about supports. Someone mentioned wood cribs, and in this case, these are not 9-point cribs, they're 4s. But you can see just how much, especially this one, has converged and how much load that's taken. And this was, long raw recovery area. So shields were, recovered through here, and this is, I don't know, maybe a year after this was mined or something. But anyways, I thought I would show that in here just to throw it into class because I found the photo. And with that is what we're going to cover for the equipment selection for the course project. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. And in the next video, we'll be talking about the production calculations and how to determine, how much you're going to be mining on a monthly basis. And so with that, we'll see you next time.